Okay, so the next part of our sock is the heel, and this actually is formed in two parts. So this part here is what we call the heel flap, and then down here where the heel turns to come into the foot, this is where we turn the heel. You hear lots of people talking about turning the heel. This is how it looks. The heel flap and then coming round to give us a nice sort of round edge of the foot. So first of all, the heel flap. Now we've got 14 rows of the leg part. For this is the size of short sock that I'm making. And for the heel flap, we're just going to work on the stitches that are at the back of the sock. But so first of all, check that you've got 20 stitches on the back. 2, 4, 6, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. So we're still working 20 on the front, 20 on the back. So I'm just going to pull this needle out and I'm going to use it to knit just these stitches on the back. So there are 2 rows that make up the heel flap, and we repeat these rows 10 times. So it gives us 20 rows of heel flap. So we slip the first stitch purlwise because we're on a purl side here on the inside, and we're going to purl across the row. And then we get to the end of that purl, we're going to turn the work, pick up your needle again, and the next stitch, the right side pattern, is to slip one, knit one all the way along. So I'm going to slip one knitwise and knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, all the way along the row. So now we turn the work back round, and we're going to repeat the purl row that we did before this one. You can see the slip stitches showing there. So we slip the first one purlwise and then just purl all the way along as normal. And then when we come to the end, we're going to turn. You can get a bit tangled up when you're working like this, but just keep freeing up lots of yarn. As long as you've got lots of flex, don't worry if you get a bit tangled, because as soon as you finish this bit, you won't be anymore. And then we're back onto a slip one, knit one, right side row. So I've worked 4 rows so far. There's another 8 of each to go. So just repeat these 2 rows another 8 times, and I shall meet you back here in a minute. So we've now worked the heel flap. It's a lovely squishy little heel flap, and you finish with the right side row. So I'm going to turn around. So we're looking now at the back of the sock. So if you imagine the sock's going to sit up like this, and there's the heel at the back. We now need to bring this around for the foot. So we're going to do something called turning the heel. Sounds much more complicated than it actually is. So it starts off with purling 13 stitches, and this is all in the pattern, remember, so you don't have to remember all of this. So we're going to purl 13. So we're now going to purl the next 2 stitches together. So just slide your needle under the 2 stitches purlwise and purl them together. Then just purl 1. And now, with these 4 stitches sitting on the end of the other needle, we're going to turn the work. So this is like a short row. So we turn the work around. So now you have 4 on this side and your others on the other side. And we're going to slip 1, knit 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, 4, 6, 7. And then we're going to work these 2 stitches together using a slip, slip, knit to create a leaning increase. So I'm going to slip, slip, and then slide this needle up the front and knit them together. the slip knit, and then knit one, and we're going to turn. So this is another little short row. So now we're going to slip the first stitch purlwise and then purl 8, and we're going to purl these 2 stitches together. Can you see this is where we turned before, so there's a little gap there. This helps to bring the heel round. So I'm going to slide my needle under those 2 stitches purlwise, and we're going to purl them together. And then I'm going to purl 1 and then turn. And can you see that we're already starting to get sort of a slight heel shape here? Probably easier to see when you're doing it yourself. So we're going to slip 1 and knit 9 this time. 1, 2, 3. And now we're going to bring these 2 stitches together using a slip knit to create a nice leaning increase, and you'll see this is where we turned before, so there's a little gap there. So we do slip, slip, slide your needle up and knit them together. So slip knit, and then knit 1 and return. Now we're going to slip 1 purlwise, purl 10, 1, 2, 3, 9, 10, and we're going to purl these 2 stitches together. Again, this is where we turn, so you slide your needle underneath those 2 stitches and purl them together, and then purl that last stitch, turn the work again, and then the last one, slip the first stitch, knit 11, and now you'll see we're ready to knit these 2 together with a slip knit. So slip, slip, needle underneath those 2, and then knit, which causes the decreased slant in the left hand way, and then knit 1. And then if you just have a look at what you've done, so you can see there we've got a really nice turned heel. So now the next step is to pick up the stitches around the whole foot so that we can knit onwards. So the sock itself stands up like this. I'll put it sideways. And now we're going to pick up these stitches and knit the foot this way. Right, so the next thing that we do is pick up the stitches around the sock to create the foot part. And I'll just show you on this sock, this is what we're going to end up with in a minute. So there is the heel flap, the turned heel, and then we're going to pick up stitches to create this foot that goes off that way. At this point, have a couple of stitch markers ready because you're going to need those later on. Always go back and check the pattern for this, because as you work through, all the details of how I've done all of this is all contained in Alice's pattern, and it's much easier to follow just as you go step by step. So this is just going to help you sort of decode what Alice has written. When we did the heel flap, we very handily slipped stitches at the beginning of each row, and that has given us these. So these little slipped stitches all the way down the sides, and these are the stitches we're going to pick up. I've just freed up the needle with those stitches on it, so we've got a bit of movement. Take your working yarn. Now to knit and pick up a stitch, we slide the needle underneath the 2 legs of the stitch there. Can you see that? And we're going to pick up the stitches all the way along this edge. So you slide the needle underneath, bring your yarn around and knit it. So I'm going to slide the needle under the next stitch, under 2 legs, and knit it. And then the next one, so you can sort of almost roll the little seam round so you can see those stitches there. So put your needle in there and knit it. And the next one, you should have 10 down this side. So I'm just sliding my needle underneath those slipped stitches. There it is. This is why this pattern is such a gorgeous pattern, because it's all very quite nice and easy to follow. Under we go. Pick up those stitches. Last one there. So you will have picked up 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 10 stitches down the bottom. So this is your turned heel. We're coming down the side of your foot. Now, the next thing we're going to do is to knit along these stitches that are on the other needle, and these are the front stitches of your sock. So I'm just going to pop a little stitch marker in here. There we go. So I'm going to push this needle into those stitches. You will so get used to moving these needles and the cord around to make it easier. It looks horribly complicated, but it really truly isn't. I'm going to knit across these 20 stitches that are on the front needle. And then when I get to the end of this part here, I'm going to pop another stitch marker just on the other end of those front foot stitches, which is just here. So we've knitted along the front. I'm going to pop another stitch marker in. Stitch markers are your best friends because they'll tell you exactly where you need to be. So, you know, if you need more, just put in wherever you need them. For me, these are the key ones here. You might want to put one in for the beginning of each round later on, but these are the most important. So, if you look here, I'm going to slide my cable out here like that. So you can see your sock. So I'm going to come back up the side here and pick up these stitches for the other side of the sock. So remember, put your needle under the two legs of the stitch and knit it. One. So we've now got all the stitches picked up all the way around. So if you have a look at that, we've got stitches all the way around the foot, and these front ones I've marked with stitch markers. We're now going to start knitting all the way round, and because we're going to do this with a magic loop, what I prefer to do is to separate the stitches to have some on both sides, and I'll show you how I do that. Now, it doesn't matter how you split these up, but I prefer to cut them straight down the middle. And it doesn't really matter if you have a slightly different number on each side, but I've pulled the loop here. I've got most of the heel on one side, working yarn at the back. And so the stitches are divided, not equally at this point, and it doesn't particularly matter, just so that you can work your way round, and these two stitch markers are visible, because as we start to go around here, we're going to work a decrease on this part of the knitting, and it just makes it easier to see if these stitch markers are in the middle of your needles. This is my personal feeling, but you can have these wherever you like. Separate the yarn the way that you want to. But the first thing we're going to do is to just knit around, just to make all these stitches look a bit neater. We're going to pull the needle from the back and knit the stitches on the front. So I've knitted the first half around, and notice this is where the stitch marker was from the first round. If you want to, you can move it up. I usually tend to wait a couple of rows and move it up, but there it is. So turn the work around, pull the cord so that the stitches on the other side come up onto your needle. Pull the right hand needle round. We're back to knitting with the magic loop, working yarn, sitting at the back here. So we knit the other half of the round. Okay, so I've knitted that side. So now we've got a whole round completed. So here is, if I stand it up this way, you can see it. This is your sock, and we're going to knit along here, which is the foot part. So, working yarn at the back, pull the needle through. So you've got a few more stitches on this side. What we're going to start doing now is working a decrease that shapes the way the foot runs, and each decrease on both needles is 3 stitches before the stitch marker. So I'm just going to move the stitch marker up so you know that it's on the right row. So I'm going to knit along here until I get to 3 stitches before the stitch marker. Pull the cable. So here we are with 3 stitches in front of the stitch marker. So what we're going to do here is we're going to knit these 2 together, knit 1 and carry on knitting. So we do knit 2 together. So take your needle underneath those 2 stitches, knit them, knit 1, and then we're at the stitch marker and we carry on knitting. Now I've chosen to split my stitches around the cable so that they're halfway across the foot, which I prefer to be able to see these increases and decreases in the middle. So I'm going to turn the yarn round, turn the needles round, sorry, and then pull my cable, slide the needle through the stitches. So I'm just going to move the stitch marker up to the row that we're on so that it's really visible when I get there. So I'm going to knit up to this stitch marker, and then this 3 stitches after the stitch marker on this side is where we're going to do our decrease, which will be knit 1 and slip, slip, knit to create a decrease that leans to the right direction. So coming across the front of the foot, here's our stitch marker. So I'm going to knit that stitch, and then we're going to knit 1 and then slip, slip, knit, slip, slip, knit, and then knit to the end of that needle. Then we're going to turn the work, pull the cord so that you're going to move your stitches back onto the needle. So now I'm going to work a whole round, and then we're going to alternate between knitting around and then a decrease round until we end up back again with 40 stitches. Now all the details of how to do this are in the pattern. It's much easier to see once you can see it in the pattern and then write down as you go. So I will meet you back here when we're back to 40 stitches. Okay, so we're now at 40 stitches. The next stage of the pattern is to do 2 more rounds which have other decreases, so we end up with 36 stitches in all. So I'm going to just separate the stitches again on the needle so that you can work the 2 decrease rounds again. So I'm just going to pull my cable. It doesn't matter where you do it, just pull it so that you separate the stitches. It doesn't matter if you don't have an equal number of stitches on the needles at this point. We're just going to run those 2 rounds again until we're down to 36, and then we're ready to knit the foot. So we're now got to 36 stitches. I've pulled the cables so you can see all the stitches there. Now we need to set it up now that we have 18 stitches on each needle, and we're going to work the toe coming forward. So do you remember these stitch markers that we put in at the beginning, which were the 20 stitches that marked the front of the sock? We're just going to move those stitch markers in 1 stitch each, which will take us down to 18 stitches, and that's going to be the front of our sock. So I'm just going to move those stitch markers in 1, and I really have to stress this: how you work with stitch markers and all your stitches is entirely up to you. This is just how I do it. So I'm going to take that, whoops, move it 1 stitch in, and then because I want that to be on 1 needle, I'm going to pull the cable at that point, and I'm going to pull the cable over here at that point. So I want that to be on one needle, and if I turn it round, I want these stitches, the 18 stitches that are the rest here on the other side, to be on the back. So in order to move those along, I'm just going to knit the rest of these stitches onto this needle so that I have 18 on the back and 18 on the front. So I'm just going to knit along through these. And although it seems confusing, when you get used to moving these stitches from needle to needle, it really is no different than having straight needles. It's just that you've got another place to put them on the cable. So you can see I've got 18 stitches now on that needle, and when I turn the work around, if I pull this cable, put the working yarn on the back, push this round and through the stitches, we're now left with 18 stitches on each needle, which is exactly where we need to be to work the foot. And if I show you the sock that way round, you can see that we're going to be knitting forward to knit the foot this way. So the next step is to now knit in the round until this section of your foot is long enough up to your big toe. So we'll have a look at that in our next video.